Good morning, everybody. We are all up bright and early at the wonderful hour of 10:30. Welcome to, why don't you port it, smart guy? We're going to talk about fan-made ports, recompilations, decompilations. We're doing the comparisons. It's the whole nine. Hopefully it's a great introductory talk. We're going to talk about something that's a bit complicated, but something I'm super passionate about and really want to share with everybody. So let's break into it. My name is Bob, as you up there, and let's go. So our opening, what's this going to actually be like? So we're going to kind of go through and talk about some of the super cool fan-made ports and decompilation efforts, documentation efforts that have come from those. A bit louder, sorry. And we're going to go through just having the very cool things that have come from these projects. The exceptional work that comes from having the ability to port a project to somewhere else means you know it inside and out, so you can put anything in there. It's pretty cool. And we're going to talk about the differences that are going to be between emulators, decompilation, and recompilation. That's just to kind of establish our baseline here. So we'll kind of do as an opener, like what's an emulator? And I'm sure a lot of folks are pretty familiar with them here. But an emulator is a device that is going to emulate another piece of hardware, to emulate its behavior exactly, right? A piece of software, I can't put Wii Sports into my computer, it's just not going to work. I have to pretend to be a Wii first. And I have to account for all of the weird end cases that come from that being hardware that's that old. And in an emulator, accuracy is the goal, right? So you're trying to accurately represent that behavior. You're trying to replicate it so that you can run the software inside. If software on a console or on another computer is broken on the console, you want it to be broken on the computer too. That means it's a good emulator. We can't just fix that because that's a behavior that is now that's now not an accurate emulator. You're not accurately emulating that software. However, accuracy is kind of intense. When you're going through this, you need to translate everything that a game does into something that your current platform does, right? And that has, for years, we've had a lot of computers that have more or less worked the same, x86 like Intel, AMD chips on your PCs. But now we have mobile phones that are doing this, and we have M1 MacBooks, and we have a whole new suite of new processors coming through too. You can't trust that everything is just going to be, I have to do this translation one time. You need to know it inside and out, and you need to figure out how to convert it into many, many different languages. So that's kind of intense, because you also need to accommodate for weird edge cases in the computer. You need to know how to work a sensor bar if you're doing a Wii emulator, right? You need to have kind of detailed understanding of weird graphical glitches to make sure that they're accurate glitches. It's a bit intense. But, you know, these days, it's a pretty preferred method of going about porting something into something else, right? Nintendo themselves, famously, who will tell you that emulators are no-nos, sell emulators as games, right? The Mario 64, Galaxy, and Sunshine pack that they put out a couple years ago, that is just, it's two emulators in one recompiled game. And we'll get to the third part here. So, why not emulation then, if we're going to have this talk about ports, right? It gets the game to work, right? Isn't that good enough? I would argue maybe not necessarily. You can get a little bit better. Emulating is good to get the understanding in there so you can get that functionality down. But you do have to deal with the higher system requirements due to the overhead there, right? You have to pretend to be everything about the console that it is and not just running the software. You're not necessarily concerned with that. You have to now have an entire layer in between to understand every call that this game is going to make and then make it work for your platform. That's kind of, there's layers to that, particularly for weird platforms like an N64 or something, right? Or an Xbox 360. There's extra middleware you have to consider that otherwise, if you're running a game, if you directly ported it, you wouldn't have to really think about that. You can just play the software. And it's also kind of limited to the features that shipped with the original console. This is a bit niche, and it's kind of a nice thing that has come from fan-made ports. But in the world of fan-made ports, we've recently got a lot of networking done. So you can actually play games on an N64, for example, with 16 people in them. The original hardware doesn't know how to do that, and we have to pretend that we only know what 4 controller ports are, right? We can't add in this functionality if it never existed, and the software really has no way of knowing it unless we're really throwing on some patches on top. It's also difficult to enhance a game. It's not impossible, and there's some lovely work in a lot of emulators out there that do this today. But we didn't have ultra-wide CRT displays in 1996. We didn't know what ray tracing was in this purpose, right? This hardware is pretty strong, and it's a bit hard to teach a game what this is if you have to also at the same time pretend to be another component here. But incredible things can happen with this approach, so I'm not discounting it completely. There's a lovely project out there if you're interested in the Metroid Prime games. It is a version of Dolphin emulator that they've thrown a bunch of layers on top of. You can play with a mouse and keyboard. It becomes a PC FPS. It's a crazy project. I seriously recommend it. But that requires a lot of effort that they've had to do a lot of patching and figure out a lot of kind of arcane things about the game because they don't have the underlying code to work with, so they had to do a lot of very interesting approaches to get that to patch. It's not something that's really universally applicable. So I mentioned kind of in the beginning, we're going to talk about recompilation, decompilation. We just kind of have to first kind of get this out of the way. What the heck's compilation? This is a programming term you're going to hear a lot, and in this case, it's kind of the core to everything that we're going to be doing as far as fan-made ports. So to use a Minecraft analogy, compilation is baking the cake. So the source code is your ingredients, and you have your recipe that's going to give you your instructions on how to bake the cake, right? But if you were to, say, give a cake to your friend, you're going to give them the cake. You are not going to give them a bunch of sugar, eggs, and milk, right? You have to hand off the finished product. So the finished product is baked, it is complete, and that is the game. So we'll kind of walk through how that looks in a basic example here. So you'll see here we have our wonderful hello.c. It's the programmer classic. It says hello. So on here on the right, it is going to just be a descriptor. We have an excellent comment in there, very in-depth, and it just writes, hello, Super MAGFest. So we're just going to run this through, and you'll see kind of, we have an extra layer here at the bottom. This underlying command is the compiler. So this is the oven to bake the cake, right? And a compiler's job is that it is going to take whatever source code you wrote, our very excellent code up there, and it needs to now turn that into something that the machine can run. Because the machine doesn't really care about the code. It has no way of knowing what that is. So the compiler's job is to build it for the hardware that you are targeting. That's important, because that's not portable. If I'm building for one computer, it doesn't work elsewhere. But our finished product of running that compiler, we see have our new hello here, and that subsequently gives us our hello Super MAGFest. So that's a runnable program. So we have a lovely runnable program, but when you open it, this isn't exactly very readable, is it? This is a bit of a problem. For purposes of trying to understand what's going on in a program, compiled code is made for computers, it's not made for people. And it's really good at making it for computers. It strips out all the fluff, it just does all kinds of arcane things to make sure that this is going to run exactly how you're expecting it, and very fast. But that's different for different computers, for different operating systems, obviously for different consoles as well. So here on my MacBook that I'm doing my presentation on, that is what that looks like, our Hello Super MAGFest. It's fine, surely. And here's my Linux computer. That's the same code. This is pretty different, very different architectures and different layers in between. So if we have all this, we have, like, for example, our finished games, we have our rips from our DVD drive or something like that. We have to talk about decompilation. Decompilation is a term that's a bit misunderstood, I think, in a lot of cases. So we'll kind of get to why that is, but to use the Minecraft analogy again, a decompilation is taking the cake and extracting all of the ingredients and recipe out so you can build the exact same cake again. If that sounds kind of insane, it really is. You're doing something that is quite ambitious, we'll say. So, for example, there's programs that are called decompilers. So you can put in your completed game or program or whatever else. And so in this case, this was our Hello Super MAGFest in a decompiler here on the left. This is a bunch of assembly. It is specific to my platform. It's not super readable. But the nice thing about modern decompilers is you also have the option here on the right, it will generate pseudocode. It's what the computer's best guess of what this actual code was supposed to look like. Now, it's not actually what we wrote. That's an important detail. And it will also get guesses wrong. So it's not necessarily going to be accurate, but it gives us a pretty good idea. So for example, here's our comparison with our code that we made. Woo. Skipped ahead a little bit. There is our code that we actually wrote. So you'll notice here that we have in our big block up top our pseudocode here. It's not named main. It's named Oh, wow. We'll fix that in a moment, surely. I don't have audio for the second. This is not going to match exactly. You'll see here that it is, it's taking a guess. It has no comments. It has no concept of state. So we don't know that this is called main. This is called undefined for. The formatting differs. It's not exactly going to be in a actually highly complex application, very readable. It's going to take its best guess, and we're just going to figure it out from there. Notable, there's a lot of lovely people who've done the work to make these decompilers work for each of these platforms. So it's not a universal experience. If we don't know how a PS3 game works, for example, we do now, you need a decompiler tool to understand what the heck a PS3 is trying to do, right? We have to speak its language first. So not necessarily a given that we have this access right away if it's a unique new platform. So an example from a pretty famous recent decompilation, this is Banjo-Kazooie. So they went through, this is their pseudocode, and this is really early in their process. So really early, the decompiler is generating fun function names like func 80316EF4. Do you know what that does? I wouldn't by its name. So the people who are going through this are actually, you'll see the red line is what's going away, the green line is what is now being put in its place. We are now documenting and going through line by line what each of these functions are. And the team who is doing the decompiling is coming up with those names. And then they're also going through and rewriting that code to be accurate. There's tools that will compare what you have with the final product when you build it, right? So the goal here is that you're going to kit this function and you're going to write it to create byte by byte exactly what that's doing. And we're going to document it the whole way through, right? So this is GC Zoombox update. This is what we've determined we should call this function, and this is how we'll document it going forward. So this does kind of pose something that's worth considering. Decompiling is kind of intense. You have to now come up with names for things that you had no idea what they were maybe an hour ago. And you have to now keep that documentation with that naming consistent. Otherwise, someone reads this and they're going to be a little bit confused. So this is quite an undertaking. And the big misconception I would like to clear up is a decompilation is not a port. A decompilation can make a port, and in this case, that's what we're going to be talking about, those fruits of those labors. But the expectation is that you're going to create the same game again. You are going to bake the same cake. You'll get the exact recipe, the exact ingredients, in the exact order. You will make that cake. So that process is very painstaking and very manual and takes years. And a lot of decompilations that have been completed, such as for Paper Mario for the N64 is like a pretty famous example. People haven't made a port out of it, but they have decompiled it. We now know everything under the hood. We've recreated Paper Mario line by line, as crazy as that is, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to end up on a computer somewhere. So that's an important thing. There's a lot of people who post on social media, especially, sometimes on some blog sites as well, that a decompilation is complete. You can play it on your PC now. No, we just have a really good recipe book, right? That doesn't necessarily get us the final product. So, probably the most famous example of a decompilation project is Super Mario 64. This is probably the poster child of how this all works, and I think it's the one that put things on the map for a lot of people. It's a very interesting project that took many years. And if you want to, you can go onto GitHub right now, completely freely accessible. It's been up for years. Nobody's done anything to it. You can just look at the source code that builds Mario 64 as documented by fans. They've recreated it line by line, super in detail. It's exceptional. But it's notable, this is just what builds the program, right? So this doesn't include any of the art, any of the music, any of the models. If you want to build this, you still need your copy of your cartridge, and or your ROM file from that cartridge, right? You're going to build that final product out of this. But this product is so accurate that it is byte for byte the same. If you were to take a checksum of the complete ROM and then you were to build this, it's the same code. Conceptually, that's a bit crazy to me because this is now at a level of detail you can't beat it. It's the same code. If you wanted to know how something works, here's like a good example from that Mario 64 code. Because people have gone through handstaking, and you want to know whether or not Mario is allowed to grab a ledge, you can just read it, and you can see the math, and you can see the equations, and you can get the exact lines of detail about how that works. You can say, oh, how much displacement do I have to have for this to work? You can just read it. Especially in a community that has a very exceptionally active speedrunning community. There's lots of very cool discoveries that have come from this. A lot of weird behaviors that if you were to just kind of guess, you probably wouldn't get for a while. But you can just do the math yourself, or you can just attempt to recreate it yourself, and you have complete understanding. It's exceptional levels of detail. And so this is going to build you a one-to-one copy of your cartridge at home when built. So that's your end goal, that's your end state. If you have a PS2 game, likewise, your objective is you're going to build the exact same disc again. So it's a very excellent project for documentation. Sorry. So because you can't document it any better, you have the code. Some notable decompilations here include, of course, Banjo-Kazooie, as we mentioned, Diablo 1, which has an exceptional community that's built from this decompilation. It's really cool. Grand Theft Auto 3 and of Vice City, which you wouldn't think, because Take-Two is famously a bit upset when you talk about any of their products anytime. But this is actually, like, the game's completely decompiled. You can find this online if you are interested in how that worked. Mario Party 4. Of the first GameCube game, you wouldn't think it would be Mario Party, and particularly this one, but that's the one that we got. The team that's behind it, there's a technical reason for that. They had to go through, and they had this was their best set of information that they had to make a decompilation. So this is our first one, but that's super cool that the GameCube tools are like that these days. Perfect Dark tends to be a very popular one as well. Very cool for a lot of people growing up. Link to the Past. This one is an interesting one. It has been disassembled, and then they've rewritten the code in modern language. A crazy level of documentation. As well, Ocarina of Time, which is also exceptionally very popular in the speedrunning community. There's a lot of great projects like this out here, and they're sometimes for really niche games. But there's a really healthy community that's going through to document these for the future, right? As far as portability goes into the future, if we just have the code, we can build it on anything. So we don't really have to maintain certain emulator behaviors or whatnot if the objective is that we want to understand this game line by line and really celebrate what it can do. You might ask, is this allowed? This feels a bit strange, huh? You're just putting source code that builds Mario 64 on the internet. Surely this is like a problem at some point. I am not a lawyer. This isn't legal advice. So my understanding of the situation is that this is compiling it is something that becomes the same ROM. It is not the original source code. That's an important distinction. If I were to read through the Mario 64 source code, you're probably going to see a lot of comments that are in Japanese. That's not how we've documented it here, right? This is like an Anglosphere-centric rebuild of that code that happens to get the same thing out of that code. But it's not the same code. It's a functional recreation. And we're figuring how the program works, which, the actual game that we've decompiled, but this does not include any works of art inside of it. So there's no music, there's no textures, there's no models, there's no other assets inside of it, right? These are different things that are quite, protected works, and as they should be. And you also can't play the game without these works, right? So at the end of the day, there's nothing net new here. We've just documented that code exceptionally well. Distribution with somebody else's ROM contents, if you have one of these decompilations, is a no-no. That's copyright infringement. You took someone's work of art. Please don't do that. These projects are fully functional based on people's goodwill and ability to do this clean room, right? Nobody's using anything that they didn't, that they got ill-advised, right? So this is, if you want to do this, bring your own ROM along. That's the right way to go about it. Now we've talked a bit about decompilations. How do you get a port out of that? That seems like we have it line by line. Surely this is kind of straightforward, no? This is kind of a weird one. This is kind of like if you had a body and the body's complete, you've rebuilt the body, now you need to tweak the brain a little bit. That's a bit hard. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, and you need to be very detail-oriented about how you do this, because now we can just modify anything about the game at its very core. But we need to now replace or account for a whole lot of things that we didn't have to before, particularly, notably, graphics. If you were going to go into your code, right, we'll go back to the famous example. Mario 64 only knows how to run on hardware from the 1990s. It doesn't know what DirectX is. We're going to have to really teach it, and we're going to have to write a wrapper that every time the game is trying to do what it's expecting on its original hardware, we'll add a layer in here that says, actually, you should probably do this. And we're going to have to do that for every platform that we run these on. These decompilations into ports run on basically anything, including your web browser, Windows computers, Mac computers, Linux computers, Android phones, iPhones. There's very different ways of going about this. And so if you're writing a port for this, you need to accommodate for all of those edge cases. Inputs as well, right? If we don't know what a Xbox 360 controller is, we can't accommodate it for input. We need to now have our system be put into the game itself and say, this is a valid controller. We can work with that. Likewise for audio, famously, right, there's a lot of weird things that developers used to do, especially in older games, to make audio sound as fantastic as possible. We need to accommodate for all those kind of edge cases in order to get an accurate port of this game, right? We have it decompiled, we want to play it. Weird compression techniques and other effects that are layered on top, we just have to accommodate that edge case. Likewise, the file system. So if I am a PS2 game and I'm trying to write to a memory card, my iPhone does not have a memory card. So we need to now tell it to put it somewhere else. We need to account for save data, for any patches, things like this, and have that all relative so that doesn't explode. And a thing that tends to be in a lot of good ports is you want to add things like modding supports that's like pretty portable. That's where a lot of the silliness comes from, and you know that's not an easy task, especially because you have to build it game by game. This is not a light work, so we have to go through this as well. This can be thousands of lines of code, and so that's kind of why when you see posts about a decompilation being complete, this is 100%. Wow, we have it. This is why we're not getting a port instantly, and this is, you need a dedicated team of people who are going to be willing to accommodate all of that. So that's an important thing. When people go around and say the decompilation's complete, the PC port's any minute now, probably not for a little bit, and it's only if people are going to be passionate enough about that game in order to get their hands dirty to do this, right? So that is just kind of a clarification. But there are some great things that can happen. This is probably my favorite example of a fun port. This is Mario 64 Co-op Deluxe. This is a built from source code PC port that runs on Mac, on Linux, on Windows, full controller support, and it's a completely online game with its own modding framework. It's incredible. So you can go through and you can play with 16 people in Bob-omb Battlefield, and you can just add custom game modes. And the networking is fantastic. It's super responsive. The port is done so excellently that it has incredible support for things like ultra-wide displays, really weird input devices, and it has a whole API that you can build across. If you wanted to do something on top of Mario 64, there's a lot that can be had here, and I think there's a lot of really fun mods that come from this scene. Next, we have one about Ocarina of Time. This port is called Ship of Harkinian. Anyone know where that name comes from? Curious name choice. Not my project. This is, again, another exceptional work of a port, and it's something that was also kind of a very big poster child for these projects being super viable. It runs butter smooth. I can't emphasize to you enough how much this game is intended to run at 24 frames per second, and I played this game for the first time this year at 144. That is an insane ability to do on code this old, and it has, this particular port was built with speed running in mind. So there's all kinds of fun tools and modding efforts that can go into this that people really want to understand everything that makes this game tick. It's super exciting, and it's butter. I can't get enough how much that is. Exceptionally great port. This one is a port of Jak and Daxter. This is a PS2 game. You would think, wow, these seem like all classic games. Yeah, the PS2 is classic now. Oh, darn it. But this is a very cool project on its own right. So, Jack and Daxter, rather than compiling the whole game into one thing, they have a intermediary language called Goal. So this is called the Open Goal project. They've taken that language that builds out the game, it's like a sub-language inside, and they've converted this and they've decompiled it completely. So now we have a complete understanding of the entire scripting language that builds everything in this game. So if you want to make modifications to Jack and Daxter or the associated 2 and 3 that were also decompiled because of this work, you now have access to use the same engine that they did when they made the game at Naughty Dog, which is crazy. It is an exceptionally portable port, and it runs great. And it does all of the mod management for you if you were to do compilations and things. This is a very great port and a great way to play this game. Also, especially because, again, we're not locked into what the hardware restrictions of the PS2. Again, I can't say it enough. It's butter when you're playing this, man. It's kind of crazy. If you grew up with these games, give them a try on one of these. It's kind of nuts. Next, you have Lego Island. This is a bit of a strange one, huh? Where you're going from console games into a game that actually natively runs on the PC. Why would we need to decompile that? This game was built for Windows 95. It has such arcane features inside of the code base that Microsoft straight up doesn't ship them anymore. Microsoft is a very big for backwards compatibility company. That's a bit crazy. So this is doing things that people are just generally not expecting it to. And the project for this is so in-depth, and they've covered for all of these weird edge cases so well, that this runs in a web browser. Right now, you can go to aisle.pizza on your phone, and you can play this game. That's nuts. The effort that's gone into this is exceptionally cool. I love this so much. Also, it's been ported to the PS Vita, the 3DS, the Xbox One. Like, if you wanted to go around just throw pizzas on a skateboard, this is a game for you. Exceptionally well documented, super cool. And if you're super interested into following along with this, there's actually a great website for it. Decomp.dev is a website that you can go to, and you can track the progress of people who are making these decompilations and how accurate they are. So recently, this is also a lovely game I just finished this past year, Twilight Princess, finished code decompilation. But it's not a finished decompilation yet. We have to finish up the linking component at the end, and then once that's complete, then we have a completed decomp. But there's exceptional progress on all kinds of games, especially games that you would think maybe would have been targets for decompilation years ago. Things like Super Smash Bros. Melee, etc. Things that have like ultra passionate fan bases. It still takes a while. These games are quite complex. But there is still lovely community effort out there to make this all happen. So this is super worth checking out if any of your favorite games you're curious about getting that kind of low-level access. So, we've talked quite a bit about decompilation. Now let's talk a little bit about the alternative. And this is a recent development. In the last 2 years, this has really taken off. This is called static recompilation. So it's a slightly different term because the goal is quite different. And the implementation is a bit wackier. So I think it's probably best if I show you the analogy. To use a Minecraft analogy, you are taking a cake, you are disassembling it, but you don't know what the ingredients are, and you don't really care. And then you throw in a little something extra, and you bake the same cake again. This is kind of a weird approach, no? Because now we've gone from completely documenting it into, we don't really mind that we don't understand what this game is. It's a very different philosophy, but it's quite good at making ports work. So let me explain. It's the process of decompiling it, making changes to it, and recompiling automatically is a recompilation project. So you're going to put in, say, for example, your ROM of a game, and it will have a program that will go through and say, okay, we are going to add this layer here to replace this, replace this, replace this. Everything else can be nonsense. We don't care what it is. It's what the computer's best guess of what the game is doing. So we don't actually have insight into what that is. It's spaghetti code. Because it's your computer guessing what the code is just enough to make it work again. So that's a bit weird. But the objective is to just make it work. That's the most important part. If your objective is just a port, you don't care about the documenting underneath, you don't care about the underlying systems, just make it work. This works out pretty well. The nice advantage of this is that, especially for less popular games, this is much faster. If the alternative is that you're doing decompilation, where you're going line by line to figure out every line of code that goes into your favorite game, this could take years. And also, it could just never happen at all. If somebody with a skill set doesn't like your game, it might not ever happen at that level, right? That's quite difficult. And so the alternative here is that recompilation makes this a lot faster. You can go through, and basically, you're going to create a Rosetta Stone of what these things that you would like to replace are. So I'm going to go through, decompile a game, and I'm not going to figure out how the HUD works. I'm not going to figure out how jumping works. I don't really care. But I do want to see how it renders a window. And I'm going to write an alternative script that I can just slip in there instead, right? It's like in a recipe, if you were just to replace what's inside the pie, right? You don't really care what that was. You're taking it out. I'm putting my favorite filling in. In that case, that could be your own layer for graphics. That could be input. That could be audio. That could be a whole number of things that are going to make a port work. That is notable, though, because this cannot be automatically applied across all games for that reason. You need to still have somebody go in to do that bare minimum decompilation work to say, this is where graphics are. Here's my replacement. It's not necessarily instantaneous. We can't get this automatic. But it is a heck of a lot faster than the alternative, because now we can accommodate for a lot of really interesting use cases that for games that share the same platforms. So quite a bit faster. Now let me make sure that I'm going to not play audio. We're good. Nice. So a great example of a recompilation project, and maybe a recent poster child that kind of went viral, especially on YouTube, is the Majora's Mask Recompiled project. And this is a super interesting one, because it was taking the approach that the port of the decompilation of this game was not yet completed. The Ship of Harkinian team hadn't done so. And so these team of developers decided, what if we did it a little bit different? And so they approached it from the recompilation angle. And their objective was to just make a game that reports, but with excellent layers in between. So there's a great project out there called N64 Recomp that takes care of a lot of this legwork. A lot of N64 games are built using the same materials under the hood, right? So this is going to be your Nintendo API call to write your graphics on the screen or something. The nice thing here is that you now have drop-in replacements for those that have a lot of cool features. Particularly, we can get resolutions to scale natively to do widescreen. It's not going to run at 24 frames per second, but the internal game clock still will. So the logic is still all correct. This project is very interesting because it's very much not in the vein of a decompilation where, say, Ship of Harkinian, I said it was very speedrunner oriented, right? You had all kinds of details in there. This is less so, right? But the objective is to make it a serviceable, great to use, fun port. And so this is going to be more like a port that would be something that would be shipped from Nintendo or something if they were to actually do this and not ship an emulator on a disk. So if you take a look at this, though, great mod support inside of it to kind of a wacky extent, considering that they're doing a recompilation, not a decomp. So you don't really have a full understanding of the underlying guts, but people understand it well enough that they can still build mods around this and drop them in. It's super nice. One of the developers on this team did an interesting thing where they drew by hand a 7K resolution map of this game map, and they dropped it into the game for use. It's insane. People really like Majora's Mask. An unlikely example of a recompilation. This is an Xbox 360 game. What the heck? This is a very unique use case. Sonic Unleashed was a game in which Sonic can turn into a werewolf for half of the game. It's a beat-em-up game. It's a beat niche. And at the time, it was not super well received. And so Sega didn't really put a whole lot of effort into porting this forward. They let Microsoft work on putting that on their backwards compatibility service. So if you have like a newer Xbox, you can put in this game and it'll work and play. And it actually runs quite a bit nicer. But they haven't put this out on PC, and they don't really acknowledge that it exists very much. The closest thing that you could ever get with this was that you had, in Sonic Generations, was the same engine. So people ported the fast levels from this game onto that as a mod. That was as close as we got. But Sega basically kind of rinsed their hands of it and said, you guys can have that one. So the fans about this are still very passionate, and it's kind of gotten a bit of a cult following in recent years, just because, the people who grew up with it are now adults and really like to play these kinds of things. And so it's actually got a full recompilation project. This kind of came out of nowhere. Nobody really talked about Xbox 360 decompilation tools, recompilation tools, anything. And if there's anybody to stealth drop an entire technical marvel, it's Sonic fans. It's awesome. So they used a bunch of interesting references from the Xbox 360 emulator Xenia so that we could understand the underlying guts. They made a whole tool set to take apart this game line by line and say, okay, we now can make this into pseudocode. We can now insert things for graphics. We can add high frame rates. We can add custom menus. It is exceptionally smooth, super nice. And the tooling for this is very catered to this game, but it can be used for other Xbox 360 games. This is a super cool technical marvel, I think. Super smooth on modern hardware to kind of a wacky extent. When you see this game move fast, it feels wrong. Because when you see this on the original hardware, it can drop below 20 like a lot. Many quality of life additions, though. This is a notable piece. Because now we have enough access to get in to make these changes, to add menus, to add maybe a little mod support, you can do things like add options. Options like turning off this song that, if you've played this game, might give you a heart attack. You will hear that for hours, constantly, without fail. They made an entire soundtrack that gets replaced by that all the time. They made some interesting choices on this game. But kind of as a demo of just kind of how smooth this is footage running at 4K on the level that used to destroy my Xbox. Completely just stutter-free. You get all of the exceptional lighting effects, completely smooth at this resolution that 360 could never dream of. And it's just a beautiful experience. Very cool. But because of this tooling, we also get an interesting follow-up because now this exists. Now we know what Xbox 360 games are for a recompilation project. We can get a less good game. This is Sonic 2006. This game is the butt of a lot of jokes. And to illustrate why this is true, this footage on the bottom of the screen is the footage from the real console. This is a real loading screen that happens in the middle of a level. Don't die, you'll have to do it again, a lot. And so this footage is going to illustrate that the original game was so poorly optimized that these loading screens would be over 20 seconds long in the middle of a level. That is less than ideal, but they had a deadline. It was Sonic's birthday. Because of this work, though, from Sonic Unleashed, now we have an entire team that's working on this actively, and the recompilation is exceptionally cool. And you get a lot of really interesting quality of life features, but this recompilation's not even done. I played through this entire game, and this project is more than serviceable for it. But they don't ship the game. They're not proud to hand it off yet, so it's just super easy to access. You have to compile your own build. There's an exceptional level of detail in these communities who are doing these recomps. They really want to illustrate to you the best version this game could possibly be. And I think that's really cool. And there's really active communities, even for games like this. A lot of infamously bad loading screens are nothing. Stutters are gone because now we're compiling those shaders ahead of time. The Xbox 360 had not done. And so you can just go through and play the game. It's still not good. As to illustrate this, here's the same loading screen I've been showing on this slide for a while in the recomp. And here we go. Sonic heads over. It's done. Wow, incredible. This is an exceptional improvement of quality over the original game, and I'm sure people who speedrun this game will be very thankful that this exists. A lot of fun stuff have come from these fan ports, as you can see, and I think there's a lot of really cool stability just for making the original game better or just run a little nicer. You have more hardware overhead, you have a lot more things you can do with it. But now that we understand things at a pretty fundamental level, you can do a lot of weird things to these games. May I introduce you to libsm64. This is the decompiled Super Mario 64 project, but compiled into a software library. That's a DLL that any program can call. If you are writing any piece of software, you can put Mario in anything. Exactly Mario from Mario 64. He's got the textures, he's got the physics, he's got the jumping, he can swim. It's immaculate. And this footage here on the right is in Gary's mod, where you can just drop in and just be Mario. That's wild. Kind of noted here at the bottom, this libsm64 is completely portable. You can put this on anything, including in your own games. You want to put Mario 64 physics into Unity games, Unreal, GameMaker, Godot, third-party mod tools, you can just do it. Mario is probably the most documented person ever. This is exceptionally cool. For example, I mentioned earlier Sonic Generations. There's a whole mod that makes him do this. You can play that whole game like this, no boosting. You can just be Italian. That's lovely. And, of course, it accommodates all of the behaviors of Mario 64. Here he is in Minecraft. That is absurd. And if you were to tell me that when I was a kid that this was possible to that extent, I would think you were lying. Because of this, you also have full documentation of a lot of mods that probably nobody would ever think of. So in this example, it's Jak and Daxter. You have access to the full scripting engine that made the game. Fully open. You have anything you can do in the world. What would you do with that? What about Obama, Jak, and Daxter? You might think this is just a model swap. No, it's not. It's a full campaign. It's a short campaign. It was made for an April Fool's joke, but it has somebody doing incredibly poor Obama impressions the whole time. It has its own custom inventory system that's not in the original Jak and Daxter. You can pick up items and interact with things in a way that game was not built around. And he gets to tell you how Tom Brady's a smart man for telling you to press X. This is a crazy cool mod. This was also, maybe, just a little bit, the reason I wanted to do this panel. Nobody can confirm or deny. We'll leave that ambiguous. How about this? You're playing through Majora's Mask, classic game. You're a little bored exploring Termina. What in the world are you to do? What if you could just catch up on killing some demons, right? Wouldn't that be awesome? What if you could just boot up Doom in the middle of the game? You know, people talk about porting Doom to anything. What if you ported Doom to another port of another game? That's awesome. You can play through this right now. It's sick. How about this one? You love WarioWare games. It's been a couple years. You haven't seen them in a little bit. What's someone to do? But you love Mario 64. You can't stop playing it. Darn it, that's a great game. What if you had 16 players into an online WarioWare-like game that you can play right now? This is a mod that just dropped in the last 2 weeks. It's super rad. I've seen a lot of streamers go through and play this. It has its own full API to make your own custom minigames that everybody can network together and play. Because we have such an underlying access at how this game works, you can just go through and just say, we'll make an entirely different game into this game. That's fine. Fully networked. Super awesome. And of course, this is the fan favorite for a lot of character mods. It's new character models you're going to throw in here. What else could you ask for? You have all the flexibility in the world. You know every animation that they're going to do, you know when they're going to do it, and you can account for a lot of edge cases that you otherwise couldn't. So you can add Hatsune Miku into Ocarina of Time. Replaces the ocarina and everything. It's awesome. Super great facial expression detail. Super neat. What if you gave Sonic Tims? Sure, why not? You can put him in anything. It's not restricted to the 360 anymore. The world is your oyster. What if you were the Powerpuff Girls in Mario Party 4? And the fourth Powerpuff Girl there on the right. Don't remember her name. And another great example, you can play as Mega Man X characters in Super Mario 64. And this one is to the extent that it's not even just a character swap. They added all of the physics, all of the gameplay. If you wanted to shoot Bowser with a blaster instead of throw him, that works. You can win the game that way. You can do wall jumping up everything. It's a bit wacky. There's all kinds of great examples of this out here, and I think there's a really passionate community that can come into these ports now that we have full access to them. And we're not restricted to kind of having guidelines around this, right? The world's your oyster. If you have a creative idea, especially in a fully decompiled game, you can do anything as long as you have the ability to put in the effort for that code. I think this is a super cool idea. I think we do have a little bit of time. If anybody has any questions at all, if anything for clarity at all, I'm more than happy to help out here. Up front?
Yeah. So my understanding of the old Nintendo handhelds is they didn't even bother with emulation. They just had the actual chip from the previous ones in their device. Looking at this, like hypothetically a brand new modern day console, porting any of that stuff, is that just redundant nowadays, or would they just need to decompile and recompile entirely if they wanted to make use of new additional hardware components in the modern day device?
If you wanted to have new functionality in there, there could be two approaches here. One is that they could write a very complicated emulator layer here that can throw in this functionality. It's a bit of a stretch. Ideally, the nice thing is, because we have decompilations and now recompilation projects as well, that would be the best possible case, I think, to get those to run with that high extendability. Whether or not that is going to be something that a vendor does is going to be a little unlikely. I think that might be a little bit weird if you start shipping this along with products, right? Because this is still documenting something else, especially if it comes with the game content. I'm sure if there's a front end for it, though, I think that would be a good approach. But to your point, right, like they had access to all of this code at Nintendo when they built the Game Boy Advance or the DS, and they still had to add the older Game Boy chips in order to read this. It's a bit of a weird balancing act. I do think this does open up a lot of interesting port ideas, though, and I think this is a good point. I mentioned earlier the Mario compilation game that Nintendo sold a couple years ago for the anniversary. That's a recompilation of Mario Galaxy on there. That's not emulated. So they did that in order to take advantage of that higher hardware layer. They had the ability to use Joy-Cons as the Wiimote and things like this. And that was better suited for that use case. But Nintendo has the time to put in the money to make that kind of work. I think a lot of games might get lost in the middle there, if not for fan efforts to preserve them, especially because some studios have just gone away. Hopefully that helped a little bit. Awesome. Up in the back? Yep.
So when you're at the compiling stage where you're trying to figure out what each code does, because I don't have coding knowledge, how do you do that? So how do I know that RFX 256 is jumping and not drowning?
Very manual prodding. So each of these values is a part in the game that you can reference. It's like it's a hex value for like where this is stored in the game code and how much you're calling it. So if you have a decompiler and you have like a solid emulator, you can go through and just say, what the heck did I just call if I did that? You can kind of go piece by piece and determine, is that behavior being called here? Is that here? What is that checking for? What is that doing? But to the example earlier, right? Like some of these use cases are kind of weird. It's kind of like, oh, every moment of every part of the game, it has to figure out whether or not Mario can grab something. That's a bit harder to disassemble. And you're probably going to have to go through that pseudocode and just kind of dissect it one by one and just say, oh, this behavior changes this. This math looks like this does this. It's very sensitive, unfortunately. But that's why I have immense respect for the teams that do this, is they have a lot of patience to go through to do that line by line.
Thank you.
Absolutely. In the front?
So if we wanted to see one of these ports in action, maybe used for like a speed run or anything, is there like an event here at MAGFest where we could see those being utilized, maybe today?
Perhaps. I think there actually is. I did not set this up, trust me. But
I do this.
So this afternoon, actually, MAGFest, the wonderful charity speedrun event that we run here every year, the run that two of my buddies are going to be doing. Hey! Two of my buddies are going to be doing their yearly speedrun of Mario 64, and actually we're going to be running it on the recompiled version of that game. We're going to run it on Co-op DX. And the interesting approach of that is that now we get a little more flexibility outside of needing to be in the emulator, because now we can run it a lot faster. So some speed tricks, such as the game lags like crazy when you're going to Bowser's Sub, you don't really have to accommodate for, because you don't have to pretend to be hardware from the 1990s. And so things can run through very smoothly, very nicely. So there'll actually be a neat demo of that port in action this afternoon. Check it out. Up here.
For someone who wants to start practicing this process, what kind of project could start compiling? I don't think jumping in on the deep end of the game.
That's a bit hard to say. I think it's based on, I would say, one that has, there's a lot of projects that are very well documented because they're based on other engines people have already worked on. I think cross-referencing something like that could be a good use case. Looking into the details of getting started with this, a resource I could say is that I recommend reading the, there's blog posts for the Jack and Daxter port I was mentioning earlier, Open Goal, exceptionally well documented about going through kind of the line-by-line process, how that works, and how they got into taking apart an entirely different language to make that work. I think there's some good references in there I found personally for my understanding of that, and so I would give that a read over. But it's a bit hard to say, because I think the kind of project that you're going to stick with is a project you're going to be passionate about, so a bit hard for me to offer on that, unfortunately. But lots of great things that are in progress, and lots of great teams who want to help, I would say check out. Towards the back right there? Yes.
So I actually recently started a decompilation project with a couple of friends. We're trying to decompile, so they can decompile it, we don't know what we're doing. So
Many cases of this, unfortunately, but that's where everyone grows together. Sorry.
I guess I was kind of are there like known cases where people go through talk about this? Because I really feel like
For sure. I think there's a lot of Discord servers that have kind of sprung up around very specific projects. I think a great use case is to go to a community that is using your same hardware as what you're building for. So if you're doing something for the PS2, I think other PS2 related decomp projects would be a great resource for there, because they're going to kind of tell you about a lot of the weird intricacies that are related to that hardware, and I think they would probably be the best people to hang off. To my knowledge, I'm not aware of a general decompilation community, but I would love to have one if the one is out there. I think that would be great for resources, especially because people...
Started smart guy.
Fair enough. I think it would be a fun project to do. Maybe we can get this together. I think it would be fun. Up in the front?
I'm going to get booed a little bit, but it's fun. AI exists. Is that, yeah, please, boo now. But we're all thinking about the bad things. Could it, technically, since you're talking about how many man hours go through lines and lines and lines of code, in a somehow positive light, could you think AI assist in these processes, or you think it's just not going to work? Hopefully, maybe this explodes, people just go, hey, we can file this, and come back 2 days later, there it is. Is that going to be part of the future, or you think it's just, it can't learn properly to do this? Because kind of the reason that AI should be okay is just to get rid of the monotonous tasks like these things.
I suppose it's an option. I think it kind of makes it a bit... I'm sure at some point, to your point, I think somebody might put together a series of tools that we'd be able to recreate, oh, this block looks more like this. But I think fundamentally in a decompilation project, because we have to document everything piece by piece of everything that's going together, an AI model doesn't really have a concept at this point of being able to say, like, oh, this is Mario jumping, because it doesn't really see the game, right? And so I think in terms of code recreation, if we were to start something else, I think that would be maybe a potential use case for expediting getting that to match for like weird use cases. Sometimes code has like weird handles in it that's like, oh, this is an extra line nobody thought of. We don't know what it does. Has to be there to match. Those kinds of use cases potentially I see there. But I think as far as documenting, I think it might be a bit hard to get that context in there. But who knows? Sure.
I think that this project is cool. AI does offer not about
That's like the biggest fear is someone starts a project, they get 60% in, they get up the wall, and then they're just done. And I'd love to see all these projects actually come to fruition.
For sure. But yeah, definitely. There's a definitely a part of his passion for sure. I think that's what brings that up a lot. Towards the back there, in black hair? Yes.
Not really a question. I just want to say Super Mario 64 co-op deluxe rules. I was playing it late in the panel. This guy here makes some character models for it.
Oh.
They're all relatively minor, but thank you.
It's a super sweet community. I love participating in it. Just playing random games, and that game's nuts. Up front, purple?
Have you contributed to a decompilation project before? And if not, is there one that you want to contribute to?
I have not personally yet, and that's just because especially I've been coming up to this panel, I've been trying to get into the weeds to really more fundamentally understand it, to take that approach. One that I saw pop up, which I thought would be very interesting, that might be a bit complicated, is that there's a project out there right now to decompile Sonic the Fighters. It is a arcade game from the early 2000s, late 90s, based on fighting vipers. It's crazy. This game's a bit wacky, but somebody started up a project for that, and I thought that would be really cool to get into. But this was kind of my good excuse to get in and kind of get the details so I could maybe take a swing with that. In the back yellow hat? Yes.
This is a dumb question, but
No such thing.
thinking of like Inception, how many different layers of Doom, like
Majora's Mask, boot up Majora's Mask, boot up Majora's Mask. Like, what do you get to guess? How many layers can you show?
I think the wonderful thing with modern hardware is that we can do anything. If you really wanted to put Majora's Mask inside of Ocarina of Time, inside of Mario 64, and then Doom inside of all of that, I think if you were really, really patient to solve a lot of really bad problems, there's a possibility you could make that happen.
I will say, and then say, just to follow up to that, I do know for a fact that David has put Doom into.
James?
So you mentioned the project before for Sonic 06, the Recompile project. So obviously, seeing the good quality of life features, a lot of improvements. It's not enough. Is there any way that game can actually be saved?
No. That game is beyond saving. The back black hair? Yes.
So when it comes to like static or compilation, so I'm never quite sure how that like benefits over like just in time recompilation, like when it's like in an emulator.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know how like so I used media for a while, but Sonic Unleashed was never really playable on it. Like,
Mhm.
also crashing and everything, but sort of the second recompilation comes out, which more or less is a very similar thing, where it's recompiling the code ahead of time instead of real time. I don't see where that like benefit comes from. Where all of a sudden it's just like perfect.
It's because we're doing a lot of the heavy lifting instead of having to deal with just in time during that translation process. And so this way we don't have to go kind of function by function as they appear and then start caching them, especially in terms of graphics language. That's the really heavy hitter with 360 emulation too, is that the recompilation project they have a whole decompiler for just the graphics part on top of the code, and that's pre-caching everything and making it native for your graphics card. I think for me that was my biggest performance jump in there, because just in time's pretty fast for like regular 360 emulation, like you're saying with Xenia. But yeah, I can't argue with the results. They did an exceptional job with that porting to make that faster. But yeah, I think it's because we're offloading. You're taking that longer chunk of time up front to just do everything at once to get that in that one binary. I think that's been quite quick. In the front again.
and just as I read, there's AI was brought up in this sort of. So I guess it's just I'm very juvenile understanding that stuff. When you're taking, I guess, the machine code and it's turning into what the computer expects to be pseudocode, that's kind of where the quote-unquote AI part comes into head in my mind. Is there any way that maybe that could be a bit more optimized to where it's
So a lot of cases that's like documented on the underlying engine, and so like N64 games, for example, they'll just kind of have underlying like this function is graphics, this function is input. That's pretty universal across those games. So if they share engines and things like that, that is a use case where you could mark those off quite easily for that. And that's actually kind of how the recompilation projects work, is that they've been set aside and say, oh, this is definitely always going to be graphics. This is always going to be input. So there's similarities there, and I think that could help expedite that. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of unknowns. I don't know if we could really accommodate with AI. And it looks like we are at time. I will be out in the hallway if anybody else wants to talk about it. I'm super jazzed about it. Otherwise, thank you for coming to my panel. I hope you liked it.